My history with the firm started the summer before my last year of law school. Early that winter, I had mentioned to my father that I should probably work for a law firm that coming summer because I really had to find out whether or not I wanted to be a lawyer. He suggested I call Horace Banta, Mr. Banta, to me, since they were old friends and they both served on the board of directors of a savings and loan. So I called Mr. Banta, who referred me to Bruce Banta. I interviewed with him and he hired me. So I started my clerkship with the firm on that date, June 1st, 1967, along with another clerk, Barry Everts, who was the first cousin of Bruce and Peter Banta. It was a great experience that summer as I was assigned research projects by Peter and Bruce Banta, as well as Joe Rizzi. I filed documents with the court, and I was also the firm's copying maven, if you will, with our fabulous new Xerox 420 that could make all of 20 copies per minute. I was also the firm's messenger. I was asked one Friday to deliver documents to a law firm in Newark, which were very important. As I was driving toward Newark, I saw the smoke rising because the riots had started, and from the radio I could tell that things were getting worse. So I turned around and came back. Having been through the riots in D.C. where I went to law school that spring, I was very familiar with what was going to happen. When I got back, they said, oh, thank goodness, because the law firm called and said they were closing and not to send their messenger. All this obviously before we had cell phones and the like. I learned a lot in those 3 months that summer, and I was convinced at the end that I wanted to be a lawyer. On my last day with the firm, before I went back to law school, Bruce Banta offered me a job when I graduated for the following year and told me to come back at Christmas time for their holiday party so that he could discuss my salary for the coming year. When I met with Bruce at the Christmas party, or just before the Christmas party, he offered me a salary of $8,000 a year, the going rate at the time. Today that would be equivalent to about $64,000, $65,000. I stayed for the party along with Barry Everts, and we acted as bartenders for a party in those days which meant a lot of liquor and very little food. At the end of the party, it was discovered that one of the firm's attorneys and one of its clients were missing. After a frantic search throughout the office, we found them passed out under the library table, which had been draped with a large tablecloth. That put an end to Christmas parties for 25 years. And when we started our holiday party again, it was with only wine and beer and a lot of food. At the time I had taken the bar, the Skills and Methods course was being offered as an option to a 9-month clerkship. I chose the Skills and Methods because the clerkships were without pay. Over the years, Winnie Banta had many clerks who served 9-month clerkships for the firm, including 2 who went on to serve in the U.S. Congress, several New Jersey assemblymen and senators, and even Bill Parcells' father, who clerked for the firm in the early 1950s. When I started as a clerk that summer, the firm's offices were located on the 4th floor of 25 East Salem Street. The offices of the firm extended from one side to the other. Mr. Banta had a very large office on one end, and Mr. Winnie a smaller office on the other end, and each had a small office next to them for their secretaries. Mr. Winnie had retired in 1963, but still occasionally came into the office through 1968 to finish up on a number of estates he was handling. I saw him every day that he was in the office. He always had a smile and was always very cordial. I was so in awe of him. I never said very much more than hello, how are you today, and goodbye. The last time I saw Mr. Winnie was at the firm's 50th anniversary party in 1972, and he passed away in October of that same year at age 83. Most of us have seen the first Winnie Banta Memorandum of Partnership executed by Mr. Winnie and Mr. Banta that became effective on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1922. Mr. Winnie had been admitted to the bar in 1912 and by 1916 was a member of the New Jersey legislature and very invested in New Jersey politics. He was appointed U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey by President Harding, and the job in those days was part-time. Mr. Banta had been in the Army Reserves as a signalman during the Great War and was admitted to the bar in 1919. It appears that Mr. Winnie needed a young attorney to hold down the fort while he was busy in Newark on U.S. Attorney business, and the partnership was formed. The agreement provided that Mr. Winnie would retain his U.S. Attorney's salary and the rest of the firm's income would be divided 50-50 above $250 in current expenses. The agreement was for 1 year, and while there is no record of it having ever been extended, here we are 100 years later. Mr. Winnie and Mr. Banta were both appointed to many governmental positions. Both were the president of the Bergen County Bar Association, and Mr. Winnie was the president of the New Jersey Bar Association. They represented a lot of Bergen County businesses, including People's Trust and Guarantee Company, now part of Bank of America through its many iterations, and even moved into the new building of People's Trust and Guarantee Company in 1926, when that 9-story building, then the largest in Bergen County, was opened. Mr. Banta told me that he and Mr. Winnie began investing in real estate in the 1920s and had pretty vast holdings. In fact, one of the properties that they owned is now part of the Cedar Park Bethel Cemetery in Paramus, but alas, when the Depression hit, they ended up turning all the properties back to their lenders in lieu of foreclosure. Both were members of Arcola Country Club and Hackensack Golf Club, starting when the club was actually in Hackensack rather than Paramus and Emerson as it is today. Over the years, there have been many excellent attorneys who have been with the firm. And in fact, I only learned recently that Mr. Banta's younger brother, Charles, was associated with the firm, but passed away in the 1930s. One of the attorneys in those days, John Shields, became a judge. Mr. Winnie's nephew, George, was with the firm but left in the early 1950s to start his own firm named Winnie and Dooley. The head of the defense practice, who represented a number of insurance companies, passed away at an early age in 1965, and another retired in 1968. When I officially started as an attorney with the firm in September 9th, 1968, I was the firm's 10th attorney. There was Mr. Banta, Bruce and Peter Banta, Joe Rizzi, Ed Everts, who was Mr. Banta's brother-in-law, Ed Olson, who had taken over the defense practice, John Harrington, a young litigator, and Bud Miller in the Trust and Estates Department. In those days, the Trust and Estate work was handled by Bruce Banta, Peter Banta, and Bud Miller. Mr. Banta, who was born in 1897, was raised in Hackensack. He told me many stories, including the ability to swim in the Hackensack River. There was a swimming and boating club with a multi-story parking garage is for the county, and remained that way until the land was filled in to build the new, at the time, Bergen County Courthouse. As the newest attorney in 1968, I was mentored by Bruce and Peter, as well as Joe Rizzi, all of whom gave me the opportunity to learn. I was assigned a lot of Bruce's matrimonial cases, and the very first one I tried was an uncontested annulment for a woman who had married a soldier during the Second World War and who now claimed the marriage had never been consummated. I tried a number of contested matrimonial adoption cases, several defense cases, jury trials in condemnation, and myriad other things. By December 1968, when I had been with the firm for about 4 months, Peter assigned me the task of taking over as counsel for 280 Prospect Avenue Corp., known as the Whitehall, which was a cooperative he had formed in 1962 and had served as its outside general counsel until I took over. Peter was also the Board of Adjustment attorney in Upper Saddle River, and by December 1968, he assigned that task to me as well, both of which entities I represented for 30 years. One day in 1970, Mr. Banta, who represented the Hackensack Golf Club, asked me to prepare an application in order for the golf club to withdraw more water from its artesian wells, and that required approval of New Jersey Water Resources. They needed the water to sprinkle their fairways. I prepared the application and the entire presentation. Mr. Banta, who was not overly fond of driving, had me take him to Trenton. And all the way down, I kept thinking, I should be handling this application, not this old guy who probably was younger then than I am now. I sat next to Mr. Banta when he made the presentation. It was succinct, elegant, and thorough, and the application was approved. And all the way back, I kept thinking to myself, boy, do I have a lot to learn. And to this day, I'm amazed at how much new I learn every day. In the 1970s, many of us smoked cigarettes. We smoked in the office, we smoked every place except the courthouse. One day, Mr. Banta came into my office and asked for a cigarette, and I offered it to him, and he took one. He then said to me that he had given up smoking years before and had started again, and Alice, his wife, was very upset with him. In a flippant manner, as only youth could do, I said, well, Mr. Banta, would you give up your gimlet at night? And he said, absolutely not. I said, well, then there comes a point in a man's life when the only thing he's going to die of is old age. He looked at me, said, you're right, grabbed a cigarette pack out of my hand, and went to his office to smoke. In fact, he used to smoke in his office, and he always flipped the ashes over his shoulder. And every few years, we had to change the carpet behind his desk because of all the burn holes. Another time, he asked me to drive him to probate a will in Hudson County. And while we were at the meeting with the probate officer, he kept asking questions about the man, his family, and so on, and learned that his oldest son was in college. As we were leaving, he shook hands with the probate officer and slipped him a $20 bill, which the man refused. And Mr. Banta said, no, it's not for you, it's for your son in college. And when we got outside in the car, he said, you know, sometimes the only way to get things done expeditiously in Hudson County and elsewhere is to offer something, never to the officer, but to someone in his family. In 1969, the New Jersey legislature, after 10 years of waffling and a lot of lobbying by People's Trust of Bergen County, as it was then known, and along with Bruce Banta, adopted a bank holding company bill. At that time, Bruce and Peter Banta and Joe Rizzi were the firm's team which created the holding company and the drafting of all the formation documents, obtained all the requisite governmental filings. Peter handled the listing of the holding company with the New York Stock Exchange, as well as the blue sky laws for the many states in which the 5 constituent banks of the holding company were located. It was really an extensive undertaking by the firm. At the time the holding company was formed, New Jersey was the 8th in population in the country, the 6th in industrial production, and the 3rd in family income, but was surrounded by much larger banks in Philadelphia and New York. Before the formation of the holding company, People's Trust was only able to make a maximum loan of $7.5 million to any one borrower. And they felt, rightfully so, that it restricted their ability to do business. The holding company permitted the constituent banks of United Jersey Banks, as the holding company was then known, to far exceed the lending limit. People's Trust changed its name to United Jersey Bank. The holding company permitted the constituent banks of United Jersey Banks, as the holding company was known, as well as UJB, to jump ahead in New Jersey and nationally to service its customers. I recently saw an article dating back to 1970 when the holding company was formed. The article said that United Jersey Bank had not only placed Hackensack in New Jersey in the national spotlight, but made it a major player nationally as well. Because of a lot of work that was done with the holding company, the firm was one of the first in the East Coast of its size to invest in computers. It purchased 2 IBM MTST systems, which required 2 operators that did the processing and made changes by merging separate tapes, all without the benefit of monitors. The firm also installed a central dictating system so that we could dictate directly to the operators and relieve our secretaries from sitting in front of us to take dictation while they, in fact, could be doing other work. A few years later, the firm moved quickly to the VIDEC word processing system with the same 2 operators, but with screens. We still dictated centrally to them, but they produced the work much faster. A few years later, we bought a Fortune system to replace the VIDEC, and we had 1 computer monitor to be shared by every 2 secretaries. Within 2 weeks, we had changed that system around so that every secretary had a computer, and now every 2 secretaries were using a typewriter. From that time to this, the firm really has been in the forefront, updating its computing system, its word processing system, its billing system, and its bookkeeping system, which has really added to the efficiency of the firm. In 1974, the firm represented the Hanson organization in the acquisition of 1.5 acres of property in Washington, D.C., near the Capitol, for the construction of a 900-room Hyatt Regency hotel, the first major new hotel in Washington in several decades. The firm prepared all the acquisition documents and the various disclosure statements, investor memorandums, partnership agreements, and negotiated the construction contract with Turner Construction, as well as the $43 million construction loan made by a number of participating banks, with Transamerica as the lead bank. I was fortunate to work on the construction contract with Turner, as well as the mortgage financing. The firm's fee for all the work that it did in 1974 was $175,000, which in today's money, in today's dollars, is almost $1 million, quite a large sum at the time and even for today. The firm invested the entire $175,000 back in the project, and as the project firmed up and became very lucrative, all those who had invested made out very well, even when the project was sold many years later for an enormous amount of money. Because there was no internet and overnight service, the firm invested in a IBM fax machine. It was on a roll and took 6 minutes for each page it transmitted. The firm also bought a scanner which could read 3 fonts at a cost of $35,000. Last year, I bought a new computer and at the same time bought a new color copier scanner for $90. Oh, how things have changed. Bruce Banda was not only a brilliant attorney, but the recognized leader of the firm. There was no wasted motion in what he did, and it was almost all business. Over the years, when I'd go into his office to discuss something, I knew immediately when the meeting was over, when he'd look down, pick up his pen, and start writing. Gary Reddish, one of my partners, was fond of saying that Bruce was the image of the perfect attorney from Central Casting. He was a little over 6 feet tall, handsome, could buy his suits on mail order without any changes. He seemed to know everybody, and everywhere he went, he worked a room better than any politician. Bruce had an extensive business, trust estates, and family law practice, and knew how to develop business. In the mid-1970s, Bruce was appointed part-time U.S. magistrate for northern New Jersey. We had a constant flow, usually in the late afternoon or in early evening, and occasionally on Saturdays, of people brought into our office in handcuffs to be arraigned by Bruce and to have their bail set. One evening, as I was leaving, there was a scruffily dressed man sitting in the conference room who looked every bit like a criminal, and I noticed the butt of a gun sticking out from his trousers. I went running back to Bruce's office to tell him. He said, no, not to worry, that's an FBI agent. As a result of that, but we didn't mix it with clients, we installed a new back door to our offices and a small waiting room, so All those that were waiting to see Bruce, along with the FBI people, could go into the back door and not mix with our clients, especially the people that were there for trusted estate work. Peter was a Harvard Law School graduate and a brilliant attorney with a near photographic mind for all things legal, and inquisitive on almost every subject. Before the age of computers, computer research, we all went to Peter and say, Peter, what do you know about this subject? He'd almost run to the library, almost blindly pull a book out of the shelves, open it up in pages and say, this will probably help you. Even when we started to do computer research, which I never did well, I'd go to Peter, ask him a question, he would do the same thing, almost as quickly as the computer and certainly more thoroughly. Mr. Banta had represented the Bergen Evening Record Corporation for many, many, many years, and Peter established a very extensive First Amendment practice and represented the record in all of its libel cases, all of the libel cases brought against it. He also represented a reporter for the New York Times who refused to reveal his sources in the famous Dr. X case, a physician accused of murdering his clients by injecting them with curare, something that was very hard to detect. He represented Time magazine, Rolling Stone magazine, and many others, and successfully argued a major First Amendment case in the U.S. Supreme Court. The firm also represented Hackensack University Medical Center, known as Hackensack Hospital, from the 1940s to the present day. Mr. Banta was a member of the Board of Trustees of the hospital for many years, and Bruce was the president of the same board from 1970s until his passing in 1983. He brought to the medical center the single largest contribution at the time, which enabled the hospital to build the Link Center, which is still the major and primary entrance to the hospital from Prospect Avenue. Bruce did not live to see the completion of the extension, but the reception area is named after him in his memory. Joe Rizzi built an extensive business practice and litigation practice and taught many of us the proper art of drafting. Frequently, we sat by his side late into the evening. Joe represented Harrington Park as a borough attorney and afforded me the opportunity to be as an assistant, which helped me immeasurably when I was appointed borough attorney for another municipality in 1973. Joe and Bob Jacobs also represented a number of school boards, including the Tenafly Board of Education, Westfield Board, and Paramus Board. He litigated one of the first cases wherein Paramus sought to remove an openly gay teacher from the classroom and to dismiss him. The firm has had many highlights over the course of its history, from establishing a vibrant commercial litigation practice, a very extensive trust and estates practice, a large banking and transactional practice. It's been active in Bergen County and beyond, with many clients outside the metropolitan area, and has achieved many successes for its clients over 100 years. The firm has also had its tragedies, especially the passing of Bruce Banta on July 5th, 1983. Bruce had had an aortic valve replacement surgery in February 1983. The surgery was performed by Denton Cooley, then leader at the time in Houston, from which Bruce appeared to have recovered. Unfortunately, a few months later, he developed a staph infection surgery, which required an emergency replacement second valve at Columbia University Medical Center in New York. That also did not cure the problem, because the infection had grown where the valve was connected to the heart, and he died at the time of the third surgery. The firm weathered those first tragic months following Bruce's death, and we designated Peter Banta and Joe Rizzi as co-managing partners, and the firm continued to grow over the ensuing years. The last 30 to 40 years, the direction, practice, and culture of the firm has been guided by its attorneys. As areas of practice have changed, new ones have been developed. We expanded the transactional banking and land use practice, we've dramatically increased the trust and estates practice with 7 attorneys and more to come. We have added new attorneys in the litigation department and increased the number of paralegals in all major practice areas. We undertook a number of class actions which had very successful outcomes for our clients. Our environmental practice has greatly expanded under Mike Stingone. We merged into the firm a six-attorney firm with a heavy emphasis in taxation, real estate, and a large municipal and school board clientele. Bob Jacobs will be with the firm 50 years this March, right out of law school and the Army Reserve. Bruce Rosenberg came directly from law school and just celebrated his 34th year with the firm. Carolyn Frome and Tom Cangelosi have been with the firm for 33 years. Gary Reddish for nearly 30 years. Marty Dever and Ken Lane for over 25 years. Richard Kahn, Mike Stingone, and Richard Wallach for nearly 18 years. Over the attorneys, some have left to go to other law firms or retired. One even resigned from the firm to establish a bait and tackle shop up in Cape Cod. I personally have enjoyed the practice of law and the camaraderie with the attorneys and the staff through these last 53 years. Our successes have always been as a team effort, and as we look to the second century and the next generation of lawyers, it's that cohesiveness as a group that will carry the firm from year to year to year.
Okay. Hi, I'm Fran.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Melissa.
And we are the social committee here at Winnie Banta.
Happy 100th anniversary!
Proclamations received to recognize the 100-year anniversary of Winnie Banta Basralian and Khan. The Winnie firm has grown from our two founding partners to a full-service firm of 30 lawyers, both past and present, who have contributed to the culture and success of Winnie, Banta, Basralian, and Kahn. Piece the historical highlights and achievements of our attorneys and firm over the last 100 years, and the vision for the future, hopefully for the next 100 years of service to our clients, to the legal community, and the residents of Bergen County and beyond. Malcolm Borg, former publisher of the Record, chairman of the board of Macromedia Group.
Mine goes back to 1967.
That's when you joined.
Well, I worked here that summer. At the end of the summer, they offered me a job, and I started, like you, I'm crazy about dates. I started full-time on September 9th, 1968, and I've never left.
That I know, Joe.
I had no place else to go, and besides, it's like you were locked into what you were doing, and so the only time you left is when you sold, okay? We don't sell law firms, but I guess either I'll retire someday, although I use Mr. Banta's line a lot, which when people ask him why he didn't retire, he said, it's too late. Well, it's too late for me. I'm 81, and so it's too late for me to think of anything else.
Yeah, I think Jim died 91 years old, I think.
89. He was just
89?
Yeah, he was just short of his 90th birthday.
Horace Ferris.
Yeah, Horace F. Banta, Walter G. Winnie. Yeah,
Walter G. Winnie.
yeah. They started the firm. I don't know if you've ever seen their partnership agreement. It hangs on the wall here. It's about this long, and they formed a partnership to be effective on February 14th, 1922. And it provided that Mr. Winnie, who was the newly appointed U.S. attorney, which was a part-time job in those days, he would keep that money, and everything else above $250. Everything above $250 in current expenses would be split 50-50, and it was a one-year agreement. Well, it was never extended, but it still went on and on and on, and our partnership agreement, just the shareholders use.
I think my grandfather became a client of the firm in 1924, believe it or not. Because he bought into the Record in 1922.
I have the book, your anniversary. I've read through it. Yeah, that's great history in it.
And so, our family and the firm go back to 1924, to the best of my knowledge. That's a long. I don't know any law firm that has clients that go back that far.
Probably not. Probably not.
That too is going on to 100 years.
Yeah, it will be. Now, I obviously didn't know your grandfather. I knew your father, and know you, and Jennifer and Stephen certainly. But the history that you in the book you put together for your anniversary was really very interesting. It covered a lot of different things, and a lot about Walter Winnie and Jim Banta. But when we were putting together this video, it occurred that none of us knew the Banta brothers, and I include David in that, although he's the younger one. And so, it occurred to me that you're the only one I knew that had the history growing up on Summit Avenue across the street from them.
Almost. I lived 5 houses away from the Bantas,
Right.
and about a half a mile or so away from Walter Winnie, but he didn't have any children my age. He was on.
He had a couple of daughters, I think.
Yeah, right. But he lived on the corner of Summit and Anderson Street, I believe. The Bantas were at 610 Summit Avenue, and I was at 655 Summit Avenue.
That'd be cool. I know your house, yes.
Yeah.
I passed it over. Sometimes when I'm coming through, sometimes I have to cut through for traffic, and I come down Summit Avenue. I always pass your house on the right and the Bantas on the left.
The third Banta boy, David, I'm 6 months older than he is, but we were inseparable friends. And through him, I got to meet Peter and Bruce, who joined this firm after law school. Peter went to Harvard and Bruce went to Columbia. So my recollection of the Banta family goes back probably to when I was maybe 10 years old or somewhere around there. David became a stockbroker in New York. He's now retired, living in Florida. All three Banta boys went to Andover, Phillips Academy, Andover, Massachusetts. All three of them went to Williams College, Williamstown, Massachusetts. I don't remember what sports they were involved in. Peter was a very fast runner, so I think he probably was in track. I don't know about Dave and Bruce. Bruce was a Navy officer after college, served in the Mediterranean as Lieutenant JG and navigator of the ship. Peter was either lucked out or whatever, but he never got drafted, never served in the military, nor did Dave. Bruce was always considered by me always my big brother, because I'm the older of two sons of my parents. And Bruce was 6 years and 26 days older than I was, so he was my big brother, more than Peter. Peter is 3 years and 4 days older than I am, and Dave is 6 months younger. Bruce was Mr. Personality. He could charm anybody. He never had an enemy that I'm aware of. He was very often the life of a party. He obviously had good grades at Andover to be able to get into Williams. He met his future wife while he was in law school, Ethel Green, who was from Natchez, Mississippi. And unfortunately, Bruce died at age 51 after his third heart surgery.
July 5th, 1983, he died, yeah.
He was 51 years old, and he had heart surgery in Texas from a world-renowned heart surgeon. I don't know if it was Shumway or Cooley.
Denton Cooley.
Cooley, and he got an infection. And they had to go back in and operate again to try to get rid of the infection. The second operation didn't work. Third operation, and he died. Tragically, at age 51, leaving Ethel a widow and 3 children, Ruth, Jimmy, and Alice.
Wasn't there another daughter? Yeah, she was, the other daughter was born around 1968.
I only know about Ruthie, Jimmy, and Alice. And Alice is named after Bruce's mother.
Right.
And Jimmy is named after his father's nickname, because Horace F. was always called Jim.
Call me Jim.
And so Bruce named his son basically after his father, and named his second daughter after his mother. I'm trying to remember where he and Ethel lived in Ridgewood. And after he died,
He started, I think when they got married, they lived in Harrington Park.
Harrington,
And
you're
moved
correct,
in Ridgewood.
Harrington Park, and then they moved to Ridgewood.
Yeah, and then they moved to a second house in Ridgewood.
Yeah.
Right, on West End Avenue.
Yeah, and then they went Rainin Court,
Rainin Court first, and then they
and
went.
then West End Avenue.
Right.
After Bruce died, and I don't know how long after that, Ethel moved back to Natchez, Mississippi.
Yeah, she sold the house within a year, and they sold the property they owned up in Vermont, Dorset, soon after as well.
I didn't know anything about Vermont.
Yeah, they lived. He had a house in Dorset, right on the main road, And then he bought about 600, almost 600 acres.
Huh,
Big farm. We used to hunt up there, as a matter of fact.
okay. Peter was the brains. He had absolute photographic memory. I remember somebody told me that Peter had 5 more A's than were needed to make Phi Beta Kappa at Williams. I'm sure he was either magna or summa cum laude, but an absolute genius. So, you know, his brain never stopped. And Peter married sometime after Williams to a woman named Nancy. I don't remember her last name.
Oh,
I think it was Gray, but I'm not sure.
something like that, yeah.
And they had 2 children, Eric and Lori.
You got a great memory. You really do.
Hey Joe, for 84, I'm trying hard. You're making the wheels spin. Peter didn't have Bruce's personality. He had his own. He wasn't taciturn or anything. He was. He liked to smile. He liked to sort of tell jokes. But he was basically a walking genius at the law and a bunch of other subjects as well.
I must tell you that if ever I had a question, I would go to Peter, and he would run to the library and almost blindly pull a book off the shelf and open up the pages. This might help you.
Yeah.
And even after we went to all the electronic research we could do, to me he was faster than I could do it on the computer, and I always went to him, and he was a dear, dear friend. Yes.
Peter died at age 81 in 2016, I think, from cancer. But
Yeah, multiple myeloma. Yeah.
But the third brother, David, left Wall Street and retired relatively early. Married, 2 children, a boy and a girl. 2 girls, a boy and 2 girls. Ruthie, Alice, and I forget the name of the boy. Alice again, named after his mother, and I'm sorry, scratch that because I'm thinking about Bruce's children, not
Bruce's daughter
Dave.
Ruth. Yeah.
Dave had a son by the name of Brinley, known by everybody as Bryn, and that's the only child I'm aware of that Dave had, but I'm sure he had more than one, but I just don't know. Because he moved out of my sphere of influence by being on Wall Street and then basically retiring to Florida and Maine, where his wife's family had a house. But I was strongly attached to the Banta family. Alice Banta, Jim Banta's wife, considered me her 4th son. They had a summer house out on Fire Island in the town of Saltaire. And they would always invite me to go out to Saltaire to spend time in the summer, more than once. I would go, I would come back. Maybe a month later, they would invite me back again. And I remember that Bruce was a master sailor. They had sailboats, competitive sailing, members of the town. And Bruce was almost always a winner. But in my book, Bruce was always a winner. I was very attached to Bruce, and I think he looked upon me as a 4th brother, 3rd brother to him. And it was a wonderful relationship.
talking about Bruce, he was the consummate person. Many people have heard me say this before, but Gary Reddish, one of my partners, always looked at Bruce as the attorney from Central Casting.
Yeah.
Tall,
Handsome.
could wear his suits. He used to buy his suits by mail order, and they fit perfectly because he was a perfect size. He worked a room better than any politician. And even though you knew he was moving on, you were grateful that he spoke to you. And he was sorely missed when he passed away. He was the leader of the firm, and it took time for us to readjust with that large loss. When I joined the firm, he was effectively running it. It wasn't Jim, and was the guy that hired me at the end of the summer, and I stayed, as you know, ever since. But tell me, what did you guys do as you were growing up? I mean, you were very close to David, but what did you do in Hackensack in those days?
There was a vacant lot on Fairmount Avenue, and we played baseball there. In the fall, we played football. Peter was a superstar in the football because he was so fast and very elusive. Behind my parents' house is 15 acres of woods that my father had to buy in order to buy a piece of property on Summit Avenue. And we would go down into the woods and look for animals or whatever. In the winter, there was a pond down there. In the winter, it would freeze over, and we would all ice skate. But other than that, we would play pool in the basement of the band's house. They had a pool table in the basement. But other than that, it was, Peter and Bruce were basically away at school, being 3 years apart. They both were at Andover at the same time. One was a senior, one was a freshman rising to sophomore. And Peter was still at Andover when Dave came to Andover. Because each of the boys was 3 years apart, if I remember correctly. 1932, 1935, and 1938. So they were all 3 years apart. But other than skating on the pond in the winter and football and the sand lot on Fairmount Avenue and baseball in the lot on Fairmount Avenue, I don't remember anything that got us into trouble.
Well, it's likely you did, but you don't really remember it, and it was small trouble at the
Well, that's
time.
the best I can do.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, no, I know that. Yeah, you mentioned something that's interesting, because I figured it was 80 to 90 years that the firm had been working with the record, and you were in the records, or at the records forever. How was it like working with Bruce or Peter, especially on the libel end, because he was he established the libel First Amendment practice for our firm.
Peter was consulted on any number of articles that were written for potential libel, and he would warn me and the editor about potential damages that could occur unless we changed the story, or we had proof. And he was meticulous in scanning and reading and digesting the article before it was published to make sure that, at least in his mind, that we were free of any potential libel suit. It didn't always work. We got sued in a couple of cases regardless. And I remember one case with a very powerful politician in Bergen County that went to a jury trial. The jury found us guilty, and the award to the plaintiff was 6 cents. which to me was a victory for us. That was Danny Amster.
Oh, yes.
He was the Democratic county chairman. And we wrote an article about how he got somebody else a favored job. And it went to trial, as I say, it went to trial. They found us guilty of libel, but only awarded Mr. Amster 6 cents, which to me was a victory for us in many ways.
Were you aware that Peter was instrumental in drafting the Shield Law in New Jersey?
The what?
The Shield Law in New Jersey that protected reporters and their
No, I was not.
sources. Yeah, he was a major scrivener of that law. Yes.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, he also ended up representing Time Magazine, Village Voice,
New York
Times.
New York Times, that I know.
With respect to the Dr. X trial, and a reporter who wouldn't divulge his sources and was incarcerated for contempt by the judge. And Peter and Don Klein, who worked with him on it, got him out. It was a landmark case, and that's part of the whole Shield Law.
Yeah, Peter was sort of off my screen other than being my attorney because he moved to Chester, New Jersey.
White House. He lived in Montreal.
White House.
He had a couple horses there, and he moved down to White House and bought, I think it was about 30 acres, and had a big
Yeah,
barn.
it
and he
was
raised
an hour
horses.
commute, I know
Yeah.
that, one way,
Right.
for him to get to here in Hackensack. But, not having any contact with him after hours, so to speak, we sort of lost touch with each other than on a professional basis.
But he also handled a great deal of your real estate because in 1965 he secured all the riparian grants that were necessary for the record property here, the large 19.7 acres. I picked it up when they expanded the
Building?
No, when they changed the maps on the riparian and extended it. About 7 years ago or so, we then went, I handled it, we went down and got the whole property out of and bought the remaining grants for a nominal amount, of about $97,000, I recall, which cleared the entire property and made it easy to develop what's now here. There were no riparian grants.
I wasn't involved in that.
No,
Somebody else was.
Tom was involved with it. He went to Trenton with me.
Tom Heffernan?
Yeah, Heffernan, yeah. We went down together to Trenton and we worked it out, and knowing that the applicant used to buy ink by the barrel, they were very accommodating, and we zipped it through in record time. Didn't do anything, still had to pay fair market value, et cetera, but it moved very quickly. And so but Peter started that and was well aware of what had to be done and protected your property.
Well, sitting here, I'm learning something.
Well, I have historical memory going back almost 54 years. You have all the rest of it. I don't have the photographic mind, but I do remember. It's funny, sometimes I can't remember people's names, but I don't think I've ever forgotten a matter that I've worked on. And that's my historic memory. But I do remember working with your father. He asked me to review something, and I sent it to him. He was in Bermuda or the Bahamas, and I sent it to him, and he came back and he had edited and corrected what he didn't like in terms of punctuation, and I replaced it. It also taught me a lesson. I was very, very careful before I ever sent anything to him again.
Yeah, he was a consummate proofreader.
Right, I found out.
Yes.
I found out.
And I picked up that habit.
Yeah, I know you have a great memory because we were in your office over here at 150, and many years later we were there, and you said, yes, you were here, and you sat over there, and you had a Diet Coke, and he sat over there, and you sat over there, they had a coffee, and you remembered what everybody was drinking that day. If I asked you have you seen changes in our firm since you started first working with us?
No, the firm is just compared to what it was, it's huge. And, you know, all kinds of specialties and one thing or another. I haven't, other than you, I've used Ms. Tao's for
Right.
real estate when I bought my townhouse. Several of the lawyers I know, but most of them I've never run into.
Well, Bob Jacobs is still here.
Bob, I saw Bob's name on the, out front.
Yeah, in March, it was 50 years he's with the firm.
But I used to know almost every lawyer in the firm 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And now, if I know 4, that's a lot. But the firm has changed, but its excellence has not. It's still our go-to firm. And hopefully it's going to be the go-to firm for a long time.
Thank you, Mac. We appreciate your taking the time to do this video.